Hello, welcome to the Factorio train tutorial. My name is Xeteth and I'm joined here with Colonelwill.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about all things trains. We're going to be covering building tracks, laying signals down, what the different types of signals mean, setting up train schedules, and a little bit of troubleshooting at the end. So whether you're new to trains or experienced with trains, hopefully you can find something. If you look in the description, you'll be able to jump forward to different sections of the tutorial, and we hope that this helps. So let's get started.
So there are two types of track. You've got your straight track and your curvy track, and they have many different orientations, vertical and horizontal, and the curvy tracks have 8 different combinations.
So when you're placing these, simply select your curvy track and you can rotate these by pressing the R key. Now there's one important thing to note. When you have a curved bit here, you actually have to join it in the middle with a straight piece of track. So if we mouse over this bit of rail, we don't see arrows connecting the two. When we mouse over this one, we can see that there are arrows because there's that center piece there, and so the rails are joined.
So in Factorio, there's 2 types of train units. We have the locomotives, which we have here, and the wagons, which carry the goods inside them. To add a wagon to the train, you hover over and a little line will appear telling you it's connected. So we're going to have 2 wagons, and we're going to have a locomotive facing the other way so the train can reverse. Right. Now we need to fuel them. There's 2 ways to do it. Firstly, open up the train, click Fuel Locomotive in the top left corner, and then there are 3 fuel slots for you to put your fuel in. The alternative, which is a much faster way of doing it, is just to hold the fuel in your hand and control click it over the locomotive. So now we're all set to go. To get in, you press enter, and it's the W and S key to go forwards and backwards, and the A and D key to turn. So that's how you drive by hand, but it's a much better way to set up a train schedule using train stops so that you can automate this process. To do this, you click the locomotive, and at the bottom you will see a list of all the stations that you have placed. So we're going to add station 1 to the orders by selecting it and click add station, and that will go to the top showing the train schedule. We're also going to set the timer on this station to just 5 seconds. Then we're going to add station number 2 and also set that to 5 seconds. Once it's done, there's a few other buttons at the top. You can click go to station, which will tell it to jump to a certain station in the orders, and you can highlight a station and remove it. So we're just going to run the train now, which is the top button, and the train will just run between those 2 stations on its own. So we come over here, we'll pull up to number 1, which is station number 1. Wait 5 seconds, and then it will go back to number 2. This process will continue to run until the train runs out of fuel. You may want to automate the process of refueling the train by putting a box with some fuel in it, and an inserter there to refuel the train at one end or the other.
The next thing we're going to talk about is signals. Now, firstly, we're only talking about the basic signals. We're not talking about chain signals. The important thing to note about the signals is that same as train stations, they must be on the right-hand side of the rail as the train is travelling. So we can see here the train is going to be going towards the west, so the signals are on the right-hand side of the rail. So what these signals do is that they break the track up into sections known as blocks. Okay, so if we mouse over one of these signals, we can see the yellow arrows indicated. We see that they're pointing to the left, which indicates the direction of travel for the train, and we can see that they stop at the next signal. So this here is one block. We can also see when we mouse over this signal where the turnoff is, that is still part of the same block. So even though it's a different direction, because it's bound by those signals, it is the same block. And that's the same if you have crossing rails as well. So if I had a rail that was like this, that would be the same thing. It's part of the same block. Okay, I'm just going to remove that for now. And Will's going to drive forward, and what we're going to see is that this first signal is going to change. It's going to go into a red. light there, and that means that that block is occupied. Now, when the trains are in automatic driving mode, no other train will be able to drive into that block because it's been occupied by another train. So we can see as Will moved into the next block, this first block became free and the second one's been occupied. And as he continues driving along, we'll see this happen. So this one goes green, now this next block is red, so on and so forth, right through to the end. And this ensures that the trains won't crash into each other as they're going along the rails.
Okay, so once you want more than one train on the line, you'll need to put in a second track to allow the trains to pass each other. You use the signals to control which side of the line they use. Now, I drive on the left, so my signals are on the right, as I said just now. So that will allow the train to use this line to go this way, and then when it comes back the other way, they will use the second track to go past. If I run these trains, they're just going to jump back and forwards between these two stations. We will see them using each line to pass each other in the middle. And the signals, as only one train is allowed in each block, they won't run into each other, they will just run back and forwards using the second track to pass each other, just like that.
In this example, we're going to show how two trains are going to be sharing the same station over here, and we're also going to be demonstrating how you have trains going back and forwards on the single rail and what you have to do with the signals. Now, on this top line here, we can see that these two signals are opposite each other, and that means that the train is allowed to go back and forth on that rail. We know that these signals are directly opposite because if we highlight one, we mouse over it, we can see the opposite one is highlighted green. So we can mouse over either of these two and see that that's turned green. Now, in this bottom example, this is actually the wrong setup if we want the trains to be able to go in either direction. So if Will's going to run this train, and we're going to see that it's trying to get to the station on the right, but it's got no path. And the reason for that is that these two signals are not on the opposite side, directly opposite. So what we have to do to fix this is we're going to rip up this first one. We're going to place the next signal, and when we go to place it, we can see it's highlighted the one underneath it, so we know it's directly opposite. We're going to place that down, and now when Will tries to run this train, we can see that it accepts that those two signals are opposite and they work. So he's going to run the second train now, and we're going to watch as these two trains share that same station. So that block is occupied, so this train up the top will wait. We can mouse over and see that it's got the red arrows, so it won't be allowed to pass through. But as soon as that block becomes free, it will take that station, that block. So these two trains will just run back and forward. You can see this bottom one will now wait as well. And this is how you would use signals to reserve that block. Just remember, if you do want the trains running in either direction, make sure that those signals are opposite each other.
Okay, so here's an example of a main line. Once you get onto a little bit more larger scale, you're going to want a little bit more throughput of trains. So you have a main line set up, and you have power poles running down the middle, which is a good way of measuring how often to place signals. Common practice is to put a signal every power pole length, give or take. Now this allows for much higher throughput of trains. You can have multiple running down the line and it won't get in each other's way. I'll run that first one now, and that will set them all running. And they will just wait along each section of line, jumping forward one block at a time as soon as the train in front of them goes. So once this gets going, we'll have a very high throughput of trains as they can all pass each other going back the other way. So now we're going to start talking about chain signals. Now in this example, we've got a train that wants to get to this station over here, but he can't because there's an obstruction represented by this wagon ahead of him, and another train coming up from the south that wants to go this way. So I'm going to run this train first of all. Now using normal signals only, he just has to stop here because of this red signal showing this, because this obstruction is ahead of him. When this train arrives from underneath, he has to wait here until this train moves, but this train can't move until the blockage ahead is cleared. So once this blockage is gone, this train will now move forward, and then this one can go up, which causes a problem as this train had to wait unnecessarily. So in this example up here, we can see how we can fix this. So this is the same build as before, but I'm going to make one change this time. I'm going to take out this normal signal. I'm going to replace it with a chain signal. What this is going to do is it's going to look ahead to the next signal ahead of it and copy its settings. So now when I run this train, it will hold back here instead of coming across the junction, blocking this other track. Now this train can come through without having to wait. Once the obstruction is gone, the train can continue on its way without causing any blockages.
In this next setup, we can see that we have a chain signal and two normal signals. Now we can see that the chain signal is showing up blue at the moment. What this means is that one of the paths has been blocked, but at least one of the paths is open. Okay, so we could have multiple directions of rail coming off this chain signal. What a blue state means is that some of the paths are blocked, but at least one is open. Okay, so if we were to remove the obstruction now, we would see that that chain signal has now turned to green, and green means that all of the paths are clear. In this next setup, we're going to be demonstrating how we can use chain signals to break up this rather complex intersection and keep it deadlock free. So what we have is a train on the left here, and that's trying to go towards the right. What we might have is trains that are running north and south. So we want to ensure that this train on the left will not enter the intersection unless it has a free path the whole way through. So we can use these chain signals before and after every one of these north-south rails, and we can run that through the entire intersection. This ensures that that train will not enter that intersection until it has that free path. So if Will drives forward a little bit here, we can see that he has now entered this block. Now, but this block has become occupied, so this chain signal right up the front will say that the whole path is not clear yet, so it will not allow the train to pass through. So let's run this train, and we can see that it has stopped there. Okay, so I'm going to get into this next train, and I'm going to slowly drive it up as well. Now, Will might clear this intersection, so he's become free, but still this block through here is occupied, so that train will not be allowed to pass. But as soon as I clear through, all of those signals become free, and that block becomes free, so that train can pass through. This is how we use chain signals over multiple crossings within the rail to ensure that there's no deadlocks. In this next setup, we have three stations that all share the same name. So if we look on the map, we can see they are all listed as station number 18. And we have these trains here set up to go to station 18. So what will happen is that each of these three trains up the front here will take one of these stations each. So if there is a station that is free under the name 18, these trains will take it. So let's run this setup. We can see what happens. So the first one becomes occupied. So the next train will take the next one. The next train will take the one after that. And we can see this fourth train here, that was just travelling along our main line.
Similar to the last setup, I'm going to run this one, and we'll see that this time there are one fewer stations than there are trains, which is going to cause this last train to sit out on the main line, which is unfortunate for this train here who's waiting behind because he just wants to go past. Now, the problem is that this train has nowhere to go until one of these stations becomes available. So until this one leaves, now he can come in. But this one is still being held up. Now he can go through. But this train was delayed for quite some time, which is a big problem when you're on a high throughput, and throughput really matters for your base. So what you want to do is you want to have a thing called a stacker, which is what we're going to look at next.
So in this example here, we've created something that's called a stacker. And as the name suggests, it's a stack of rails that we can see running horizontally here. You could have this vertical, doesn't really matter. But what this allows us to do is have trains that are waiting to get to a station, so they're going to be coming to the station over here. It allows them to wait for that station and not be blocking up the main line. So Will's going to run this first train, and we'll see it's going to path to the station, and the trains behind it are also trying to get to that station. So they will actually go into the stacker and they will wait there until that path becomes clear. What we see here is we have another train which was just trying to get through, so it is able to continue along the main line. It's not obstructed by these other trains that are waiting. They're waiting off the main line, and we'll see in a second this train is going to exit, and one by one these other trains are able to take that station. So this is an effective way of us keeping trains waiting for stations off the main line, meaning that other trains can get through and get to their destinations without being held up. This is a massive thing that we have to be aware of when we're looking at rail networks which require high throughput. In this next example, we can see that we have two sections of mainline, one going east-west, one north-south, and we're going to join these using a simple T intersection. So Colonelwill is going to build this intersection while I talk you through what he's doing. So first of all, he's going to place in the curved parts of rail. And what we're going to do is ensure that a train coming from any direction can make a turn into a different direction. So he places them through the center of the intersection here. We can see that all these curves are allowing the trains to go in any direction. He then has to place the straight pieces of rail that joins up the curved bits and finish off up the top in these two sections here. Okay, so it's now signaling the intersection. First of all, Will's going to start off using the chain signals. And we're going to see that he's going to place these throughout this center bit of the intersection. Now, this is the most complex part of the intersection. We have a number of rails that are crossing each other, so that's why we're using the chain signals. It will not allow a train to enter into that middle section unless it can clear that middle intersection part and continue along the main line. So he'll finish it off by placing the normal signals. Now, as we can see here, these signals have been flashing. Don't worry about that. Keep placing your signals. Once the intersection is complete, they will stop flashing. Okay, so now we can see when we mouse over this chain signal here, that signal will not allow a train to run through the intersection unless it can clear this northern part here. And that's the same for each part that he has signaled along here. Okay, so this going along this east-west bit here will not be allowed to pass through unless this signal here is clear. Okay, so that's how we'd signal up complex sort of T intersections. This one is fairly basic. Later on, we're going to be going to some more examples with some bigger ones, and we can see how effective chain signals are in T intersections.
So in this example, we're going to pull a main line diagonally off of another main line. And again, we're using the chain signals to control this tight bit of the intersection here where the lines actually cross each other. So this train in the south is wanting to turn off and go north, but he can't because there's a train ahead of him. The chain signal that's just in front of him is showing red, which means that he cannot enter the tight bit across here until this train is gone. Once this train moves on, he will be allowed to go through and continue on his way.
In this next example here, we can see that we have two main lines that are crossing diagonally, and this one is a little bit confusing just by looking at it. It sort of puts you off the fact that it is diagonal, but all the same principles apply. We have the chain signal starting at the start of the intersection here, runs through the center, and then we have a normal signal on the other side. So if a train was running up here, it would not be allowed to go through this intersection unless this last signal here was free, and that's why we have these chain signals before it communicating with this last one. So this is just another example of using chain signals, multiple chain signals, to keep the main lines free.
Okay, so once you get onto a larger scale, you're going to want more throughput, and one line is just not going to be enough. So in this example, we have two main lines going in each direction, and we tee off up to the north just like before, and a simple T. However, we're doing it with two lanes. But the same principles apply with the chain signals, there's just a lot more of them. But again, we still end with a normal signal and chain signals throughout the junction to make sure the trains do not block each other as they pass through.
So once we're looking at this sort of scale, if you go really, really big, we can continue up further and we can see an example of an 8-lane. Okay, so this is an 8-lane T intersection. The exact same principles apply, and that's something that's important and we want to drill into, is that use the chain signals through the center of the intersection to ensure that the trains do not get blocked in the middle. They only pass through the intersection if they can find a clear exit. And really any scale or any size of intersection that you want can be achieved. You just have to scale it up. Make sure you go back to the basic principles of each of the signals. Okay, so this is, as I said, an example of an 8-lane intersection. Looks quite complex, but really it's using just all those basic principles over and over. Now, quite fun to watch. We can see Colonelwill driving through this intersection. As we do, make note of all the signals that are going to be changing. So we can see that all these signals down this side are going red. This would mean that no trains, if there are any trains coming from over here, they would not be allowed to pass up through the intersection over here. So as Will continues driving through, we can see that they're now becoming green because he's passed through, so a train would be allowed to come up here. And that's the beauty of chain signals. Even though Will's technically still in the intersection, if this path is clear going up to the north, a train would be allowed to pass through.
So now we're going to talk about train layouts. Now in Factorio there is no restrictions on the size of train you can have. These are just some of the common examples that you'll find. We're going to start off with a 111 train. Now that means that it's a 1 locomotive, then 1 wagon, and then a locomotive to go back the other way. And on to a 121, a 141, and my personal favourite, a 262. Also to note, this is a 101, which means it has no wagon in the middle. Call this a packed train, which just means passenger, and it's used for us to get around from outpost to outpost without any extra wagons slowing us down.
Okay, so in this example, we can see we have a mock setup of what you might have in a base. We have a few stations that are loading and a few unloading stations, and this gives you an idea of how you can have multiple trains running on the same network, and they will, if you follow the principles that we've been talking about, they will never deadlock. Before we do go into this though, what I quickly need to talk about is station design. So there is a reason why you see many people having their stations horizontal, and the reason for that is we can see here this is a vertical station. We have 1 locomotive and 2 wagons. Now that doesn't quite cover this blueprint here that I have. So we can see that the wagon slowly hangs there's a gap that's not covered by these inserters. If we take that same blueprint and we rotate it horizontally, we can see that it's exactly 2 wagons wide. So there's 14 inserters long on that, which basically means that you can load and unload stations quicker. Okay, so best practice for unloading and loading trains quicker is to have stations horizontal. So we're now going to have a look at this example. Will's going to fire the trains up for us, and we're going to see there's multiple trains on this network. They're never going to deadlock, so we've put chain signals through this middle intersection here, which means that the train will not be allowed to enter into the intersection unless it can clear the other side. And we can sort of see the trains loading and unloading and some of the materials flowing through. So obviously your base would be on a bigger scale than this, but this just shows that how you'd have multiple trains on the same network and never have deadlock. And these will continue to run back and forward. The only thing that we have forgotten to do here is to set up systems to automatically refuel the trains. As we spoke about earlier, you would have little boxes full of coal or whatever you're using to fuel your train, with an inserter next to it to insert the fuel into the train, remembering that when we're using double-headed trains like this, we need to refuel both ends of the train. So this is just a quick example. We'd love to see what you guys can come up with. Now we're going to be troubleshooting some of the most common issues that we see posted on Reddit and the forums with regards to trains, tracks and signals. So Colonelwill's going to start us off with one of the common issues that we see with curved rails.
Okay, in this example, these curvy tracks appear to be connected visually, but if you look at the yellow arrows on this inbound curvy track, you can see that it's actually not. It's only connected to the main line, which means that a train coming in from the curvy track will not be able to go to the other curvy track. It can only go down the main line. To fix this, we need to pull this curvy track back 1 tile. Now we can see that the arrows are on both directions, so the train can go on to either output.
Okay, now moving on to the next issue that we quite commonly see, we can see here that this signal is flashing. Okay, and the reason this is flashing is that because this signal has been placed over multiple pieces of rail. So we can see here that it's been placed over the curved piece of rail and the straight piece of rail at the same time. It doesn't know which part essentially it's connected to and what exactly it's signaling. So if we wanted to fix this, we'd have to move this signal back to before where those 2 pieces are, and we could signal after them. That's fine. We can see now that that signal is not flashing. We quite commonly see this over this diagonal piece as well. So we can see this signal doesn't really know whether it sort of belongs to this piece here or this diagonal piece as well. And that causes issues. So if we wanted to fix this issue, all we have to do is simply move that signal further along. So now it's not going where two pieces are essentially crossing. Okay, now moving on.
In this one's flashing because he's actually seeing himself. If I was to follow what he's looking at this piece of track, up here, across here, down here, and back to himself. So he doesn't really know what block he's in because he's in his own block. To fix this, you just carry on building this intersection. If I place a few more chain signals, it's now stopped flashing and they're all happy. So tend not to worry too much. If you think it's okay, just keep building. If it's still flashing at the end, you've probably got a problem like Xeteth was just saying, where it's intersecting two pieces of track.
Alrighty. So this first example that we have here, we consider this train is no pathing. And this goes right back to the start of this video. Most important thing about signals and train stations is that they must be on the right-hand side of the rail as the train's approaching. So we can see that this train is trying to go towards the right. The station is on the left, and we can see when we mouse over the station, its arrows are pointing to the left, so it would essentially register to a train that was coming from the right. So to fix this issue, if we were to take this station and put it on the other side and then task the train to it, that would actually work. Okay.
Okay, in this example, you can see this train again trying to get to the station over here, but again, it's no pathing. And the reason is that the signal here is on the wrong side of the track. As Xeteth just said with the stations, the arrows are facing the wrong way. To fix this, we would simply put down a signal on the other side, and now it will work.
Okay. One of the most sort of obvious things, but sometimes overlooked, is that if a train is no pathing, the first thing to check is whether it actually has access to the station it's trying to get to. So this train here, starting off in this intersection, is trying to get to the top of the intersection over here. Now that looks fairly simple and it should be able to get there, but when we actually look at it, we can see here, if we follow the rails that this train's on, if we look here, it can either go this way, but we don't want to go that way, or it can come up this rail here. It actually has no access to this station over here, okay? So if we wanted that train to be able to pass to there, we could put in a rail switcher, which would look something like this, and that would allow the train to get through. But the first thing to check if you are getting no pathing issues, definitely going back to the previous example, is make sure that your stations and signals are on the right side of the rail, and that secondly, the train actually has a path to the station.
Yeah, same example here. This train is trying to get to this platform up here, but he can't do it because there is no physical way for him to get there because he can't go backwards once he's gone down this line here.
Thanks everyone for watching our video on trains. We hope you've liked the video and we hope that it's helped a bit. If you have any questions or queries still, feel free to leave a comment below and we'll do our best to answer. If you'd like more real-time help with any issues you might be having, check by Colonelwill's stream. There was a link in the description below. There's a great community there. Colonelwill himself is more than willing to help you out with any questions you have, as well as the general community on Twitch. There's very knowledgeable players who are always willing to help out. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.
Take care, guys.